Hello and welcome to the Draft Talk podcast, brought to you by the good folks at 99 Yards. We're here every week, every few days at this rate actually, leading up to the NFL draft. We've got news, interviews, top fives, mock drafts and much, much more. Today we're looking forward to the Combine, looking at what's going to be going on down there over in Indy and discussing some of the players who've been invited. I'm your host Brian, and joining us today, talking of invites, three guys who always accept the invite to this podcast. It's a Draft Talk team. We're all together. It's MJ, Owen and Stu. Guys, how are we doing?
We're not going to have an awkward pause this week, so I'm just going to start because we've been awkward pausing it for about 2.5 years now.
It's become our bit now.
Yeah, I know. I should have left that in. Yeah, very good. Things start ramping up again. Another step on the road to the draft. The Combine's nearly there again. One of these landmarks that we look for as we head towards the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge landmark in the draft process. A really big week for everyone. We'll get through some of the guys that we're looking forward to seeing in Indy now, and so looking forward to seeing who leaves, having rocketed their draft stock. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting week.
Yeah, it's going to be great, isn't it? It's another piece in the puzzle, and we get some official measurements. You know, we think we know about these guys in terms of height, weight, and so on, but now we're going to get some official numbers. And as Owen's just said, it'll improve some guys' draft stock, and some guys will start to slip.
Absolutely, it's definitely draft season now. You didn't already know. The Combine, one of, if not the biggest signing, flashing red lights now. It's draft season. It's time for the NFL Scouting Combine, kicking off on Tuesday. Scouts, coaches, GMs, and the 319 of this year's top draft prospects. We're heading over to Indianapolis for the Combine. It's getting pretty exciting, isn't it? So we'll be talking about it today, as we mentioned. But before that, we love drafts, right? Everybody does. We love mock drafts as well. If you listened last week, we were looking at our own mock drafts, having a word, seeing what we liked, what we didn't. I'm going to have a look at someone else's today. Stepping up to the plate, we've got NFL.com Daniel Jeremiah, his mock 2.0. We've all had a look at that. We've all got some thoughts, just to see. We wonder what he's thinking. So, what are your thoughts, guys? Any shocks in there? I could see one or two myself.
Well, should we just start off by thanking Daniel for listening to our podcast? Because we did ours first. And then he put out 2.0. And if you go down his list of picks, I'm not talking top 10 here, where we might have some similar picks, but there are picks all over the place where he has gone along with either Stu or Owen, myself, or all of us. I think by now we're all picking Paris Johnson to the Titans at 11. But there were picks all over the place. He liked Deonte Banks for Minnesota. That was one of Stu's. He liked Darnell Wright for Pittsburgh, which was one of mine, and Osiris Torrance for Buffalo. That was one of Owen's. But there was almost I think 10 picks outside of the top 10 where he's just lined up with us. So thanks a lot, Daniel, for listening. Glad you like the show, and that you're lining up with what we think.
You can come on anytime.
If we could fit him in, we've been pretty busy.
Yeah. You'll have to work around our schedules. Going down the list, what's noticeable to me outside of one huge talking point is that I think this feels more not necessarily right, but feeling like we're heading in a direction where kind of like Darnell Wright to the Steelers, where he's climbing up boards that there seems to be a bit more progression with this one than the last one, where the last one felt like it was just throwing names out there that he liked. I feel like this one feels a little bit more jointed together, where there's a lot of picks that make a little bit more sense. One that I can't quite get my head around is Bijan Robinson to the Buccaneers, just because of how much they need to do. It's interesting that he's got that. I think, did you have that, MJ? Is that right?
Yeah. You did. Yeah.
It's interesting to see that he's gone along with it. But maybe Stu wants to touch on that. The big talking point is Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson.
Oh, don't make ads.
We've got to that point of draft, Stephen, haven't we? Will Anderson is now boring.
It makes me angry. Not because DJ, because I think DJ, I don't think he said as much when he was talking about it on the podcast that he doesn't rate him above Will Anderson, but he's really clued in on what teams are thinking. And it just annoys me that there's this narrative of, oh, look at me, I'm so fast and I've got wingspan like a pterodactyl and Mr. Tickle combined, and no, I'm so amazing. Same thing happened with Trayvon Walker last year, and teams just forget that. Aiden Hutchinson was a much better player than Trayvon Walker, and for my mind, Will Anderson is a much better player than Tyree Wilson. Yeah. Now, you can argue that because some people love Tyree Wilson, I don't. That's probably not a surprise, but it's we're back at that again, aren't we? Same happened last year, and it's happened even earlier this year. So I think it's going to pick up steam as time goes on.
Yeah, you mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. I instantly, what went through my mind is this exact same thing happened to Trayvon Walker last year. Not Trayvon Walker, sorry, Kayvon Thibodeau last year, where he was number one on basically everyone's board all season, and then all of a sudden he's fallen, and a bit of prospect fatigue comes in now and again with people who are talking about it all the time. But you can't take Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson. I'm sorry, you can't. You can, I guess, but
I'm just imagining the most horrendous Mr. Man ever, because we've crossed Mr. Tickle with a pterodactyl there. I mean, that would give kids nightmares, wouldn't it? But you're right. It's exactly. It feels like we've been here before. Aiden going into the combine last year, Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, all of a sudden, Trayvon Walker is the talk of the town. And it carried on through right the way to pick number one. So maybe we're in the same territory again.
Been an interesting start for the Cardinals with a new GM and a new head coach to go that bold.
It's ballsy.
Ooh, yeah, very much so. And if you've passed up on, if Will Anderson Will Anderson might fall completely flat on his face, because we don't know at the NFL, but if you're bold enough if it works, you're an amazing, but I would be new in the job, I wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, right. And the other, not necessarily defending the pick, but we're all expecting Chicago Bears to trade out at number one. As soon as that happens, this changes again. So I guess it's just throwing a scenario out there rather than no, it could happen because of the NFL's obsession with traits. But as soon as the Bears come out of that pick, as we expect them to do, then that pick probably changes.
Yeah. As soon as there's got to be a few trades that just mess up everyone's mock.
Exactly.
No.
And I think as well, we don't know what the Raiders are thinking at quarterback yet. That could change everything if they do pick Aaron Rodgers, which there's whispers of. Don't know if that's anything close to being a thing, but if it was, then surely they don't have that number 7 pick. And again, that totally changes where the draft board might go.
Yeah, looking at, there's one pick that I thought, you see picture, that's a really nice space. That makes sense, sort of meshes well. That's the Lions with their second pick, taking Anthony Richardson. And, we spoke about him on the podcast with Trevor Sycamore the other week, where he's nowhere near a finished product. But I feel like that'd be a nice place for him to land. Jared Goff, fantastic season last year. He's definitely the starter. There's no sort of pressure to let's get rid of Goff and get this guy in straight away. There'll be some of that, but not too much. It's not like when it was Green Bay.
Right, Jordan Love.
Yeah, Jordan Love. Sorry, and it's is he to replace Aaron Rodgers? Now Aaron Rodgers is great. He's a totally different situation to that, and I think, like you say, he's got a lot of work to do, but he's got so much potential. That could be a really nice situation for both him and the team.
Yeah, it would be a nice landing spot potential as well, because they've got a relatively good and youngish offensive line, and they've got some good weapons as well. When you think of Jameson Williams is coming back to fitness, Amon-Ra St. Brown still in a rookie deal, they could build a nice offense, and they're also building on the other side of the ball as well. But I will question whether Anthony Richardson will still be there at 18.
Yeah, they'll have to take him at 6, I think, if they want to.
Well, there we go. It's all thoughts on DJ's mock. Like I say, listen to the other podcast. Check out the website to see what the guys did with their first mocks. Exciting stuff. But yeah, let's move on to the combine kicking off on Tuesday. It's going to be, like it always is, a bit of a circus, but there's plenty to learn there, guys. What are the key things you're looking for, I guess, in general, and then any players that you're going to be keeping a keen eye on?
Yeah, so drills start Thursday, but the players start landing there on Monday and can speak to NFL teams from Tuesday, right? So it'll be interesting to see what kind of intel that we get from those meetings before the drills, and kind of comparing and contrasting that information. I think the most important thing from this combine is going to be measurements rather than on-field and athletic testing. It's going to be, I'm sure we'll come and touch on them, but the big talking points are going to be Bryce Young's size, Peter Skoronski's arm length, what's Tyree Wilson's wingspan like, and then we'll get through to some athletic testing where there's some players that maybe do need to prove something in athletic testing, but I'm really looking forward to seeing and getting some verified measurements, and say we'll get onto it and once the guys are given their initial thoughts. But there's going to be some very interesting measurements coming out.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Young is a big talking point, isn't he?
Yeah.
We've all know that Bryce Young is small. It's just a case of how small is he. You don't want to poo-poo the guy because he's been so good in college football. But when you're thinking of taking potentially one of the smallest quarterbacks ever, at number 2 is where he's been projected a lot of the time. Some teams might go number 1. There's exceptions to rules, but there's rules there for a reason as well. You know, these guys don't do that ever. So it'd be interesting to see if he comes in a little bit heavier than we might think. I think that would be a good thing for him.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that we've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again before the draft. There's the lack of too many blue chip players in this draft means that those positions from 15, 20 through to 60, 70 are all still up for grabs. And yes, tape is important, obviously, but measurements where it's, do you want somebody to be 10 pounds lighter, 10 pounds heavier? Do you want somebody to be an inch taller? All of this is going to play into a team's overall picture of whether or not they think their guy is a first round pick or a second round pick. It could be, as pivotal as that, particularly in some of these positions which traditionally are getting taken in the first round, your edge rushers, your cornerbacks, your O-line, maybe, your wide receivers, although it's not as strong as previous years. So these measurements, although, small adjustments, they are going to be crucial.
Honestly, obviously they're really strict, but he has got quite a bit of hair, hasn't he, Bryce Young? So he could sort of get it. You know, I mean, you could probably tell I've had mine cut today, but you think if you let it grow out a bit, maybe that.
I couldn't actually.
Well, with headphones in it, but it looks pretty good. That's
just an idea. To worry about.
Bryce, if you're listening, mate, get a bit of wax on there.
You know these massive hats that all the NFL stars seem to be wearing at the moment, like a little hat, like with a massive hat on top of it. That's exactly what he needs.
Have you seen the big sort of like Smurf shoes? I've seen a few sort of
yeah.
Smurf
shoes and a massive hat.
He walks up to the thing, the guy's like, hang on a minute. 6'6". Oh.
Bryce Young's size is going to be the huge talking point between now and next Thursday and afterwards. It doesn't matter what he comes in. He's listed at Alabama at 6 foot and 194 pounds. He's not. There's fairly accurate rumours that he actually played at closer to 185 pounds than 194, so that's 10 pounds lighter than he's listed at. Is it 100% guaranteed he comes in smaller than 6 foot? It'd be very interesting to see the weight, because we know at the combine that it's kind of inflated. Has he been eating pizza for the last 6 weeks since the season ended? So we can put on. I mean, it's not even necessarily a good thing putting on bad weight, but we've seen it, right? And the comp's going to be, well, Kyler Murray was small, but he's a lot thicker than than Bryce Young is. I would be very surprised if Bryce Young gets to Kyler, and what he was just over 200, was he? So yeah, I think it's very possible that Bryce Young comes in around 5'10", and if he comes in, the lightest ever quarterback weigh-in at the combine is 192. So he could well come in as the lightest ever quarterback who has gone to the combine. Now, I'm not sure. That was the reason why I think he might have put on some weight, because I'm not sure he wants that kind of accolade attached to him going around for the rest of the season. That's all that's going to be said, is this is the lightest quarterback. It's the same with like Kenny Pickett with his hand measurement. That's just what you're labelled then for the rest of the season. So it wouldn't surprise me if he has put on some of this bad weight, so-called bad weight, where he's just been piling fat into his body to try and get over the threshold. But he's going to be small and he's going to be light, and that will be now and that will be afterwards as well.
Do you think it's worth his while going and getting weighed and measured? Difficult one. Then he doesn't have that measurements, but then does that throw him in? Well, why is he not getting weighed and measured?
Yeah.
It's a difficult one for him, because you know that people do sometimes not do bits that they don't want to do at the combine. I think
to go to the
narrative
combine,
could spin anyway.
You have to measure in, don't you? So you can go to the combine and not do the drills, but you can't do the drills and not measure. You have to measure if you accept your combine invite. I just go back. I don't know if you're going to say any more this year. I was just thinking that part of me thinks he has to. He can't avoid it, simply because giving that measurement to all teams means that teams that don't come to him at pro days or when he's in the facilities or NFL facilities, that they're trying to get a gauge of measurement, that here he can give just something to everyone, and it's something that he has more control over, because he can pile some of that extra weight on, and it doesn't affect kind of his throwing and pro days. Because I don't expect him to throw, but I think that this is probably the most important measurement of this draft season.
I'd say the best thing you can do is just get it out of the way. Just go, get measured, get it out of the way. Because if you don't, it just becomes a bigger and bigger thing, doesn't it? You know what, like you say, Stu, you start the whole rumour mill. Why is he not there? It is a little bit like Kenny Pickett and the hand size last year, and that became a big thing, didn't it? Because I can't remember. It was the combine, wasn't it, where it finally came out? You know,
he decided not to at the Senior Bowl, didn't he?
Yeah. That was it. So in effect, it just became a bigger thing. Now, in Pickett's terms, it's worked out for him. He was taken in the first round and had a fairly decent season and seems to have got past that. But if I was Bryce Young, I'd be going, okay, let's get measured, get it out of the way, and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I wonder if his agent is telling him maybe this doesn't matter so much. NFL too. If you took, all the mocks have him going to the Texans at number 2. They know he's small. Does just confirmation of knowing that he's small change anything for them? If him, they know that he played close to 185 pounds. They'll have sources there, and D'Amico Ryans is now their head coach, who has links to Alabama, was at Alabama, so you've got that link there as well. They'll know exactly what he played at, which we believe is about 185. If he comes in at 190, does that change your thinking at all? Because you knew he played at that anyway. So it's almost like, if teams know he's light, if they like him, they're going to like him anyway. I don't think it's going to change the teams that do like him that much, but there certainly will be teams that won't want to draft this guy. But luckily, they'll be later on in the draft and he'll be gone by then.
Yeah, you're right. And for the sake of, like you say, for the sake of £5 extra, and like I say, if he reaches 192, 195 or whatever, probably people got to be, that's all pasta. That's like, you really need to go to the toilet. That people are going to know, like you say, and it's I think just get it out of the way, and teams will be like, look, we're not taking anyone under 200, 210. We're just not doing it. But like, some teams will be like, all right, we think we could deal with that. We think maybe we can get him our system. We can put some pounds on him if needs be. You're either okay with it or you're not. And I think, like you say, just get it out of the way, and then you'll get asked loads of boring questions about it. But
I think he's a quarterback who'll go weigh in, interview, and not do much else. I don't think he needs to and that might cross over into who I think does need to do. And I think that one of the top quarterbacks, sorry, Brian, I've just cut into your segueing skills there, is I think that Will Levis is one of the guys who probably should throw. I don't know what you guys think about that, when there's been question marks about his accuracy and things. And I think if he can show that he is accurate enough, then that can, I know it's a false environment, but he can show off his arm strength as well. I think that that's something to look out for, as well as how well Will Levis will throw. Because we know he's athletic and we know he's got the size. I don't think the measurements are that much for him, but the throwing, I think, is going to be a big thing for him.
Yeah, and I just think what these quarterbacks do will be a huge talking point. Maybe a good way of doing it is the big four. So you've got Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. How many of them, if any of them, throw, do you think?
Do you know what? Sorry, Stu, I was going to say, if I was CJ Stroud, I would throw. I'd kind of go, because he's pitched as probably the most accurate, certainly in comparison to Levis and Richardson. I'd go out there and prove it. Everybody's talking about Bryce Young. There's so much chat about Will Levis and Anthony Richardson in the last month. I think if I was CJ Stroud, I'd be tempted to go back out there and go, just remember who I am and remember the qualities that I've got. So yeah, for me, I'd like to see CJ Stroud throw.
In the case of CJ Stroud, I would be waiting to the last minute and figuring out what everyone else is doing first, and I'll be the last person to decide.
If I was, so going to the 04, if I was Bryce Young, I wouldn't bother.
Yep.
If I was CJ Stroud, exactly for the reasons MJ said. For Will Levis, I would throw, as I think you need to prove something accuracy-wise. And if I was Anthony Richardson, I would wait to the pro day to throw, I think. I think with Combine, he can show off his athleticism, and he can show off his arm when he's in an area where he's a bit more comfortable and controls the narrative and knows the receivers. Where there is still some question marks about some of his throwing ability as well. I would use the Combine as this is how athletic I am. I'll show you what I can do a bit later on. Entice the teams in a little bit, show them that athleticism, and then use his pro day where he's got the control of the narrative to throw.
Do you think if he does throw and he looks amazing, does that change anything? So I guess that would be what your decision making is, right? That if you're Anthony Richardson, you think, if I go out there and put on a show, what does that achieve for me? Whereas someone like, and you could say the same, what my thinking is with CJ Stroud is, have I got too much to lose if the other big three aren't? And I go out there and it's an absolute disaster. The receivers aren't even running in the right direction. I can't hit a band door, which has happened. I can't think, who was it a few years back? Jake Fromm, who was the Georgia quarterback, could not. They just had him throwing deep basically the whole time, and they were just dying on him the balls, and it just obviously really hindered his draft stock, and he's not even in the league anymore. But I think if the others don't, if you're CJ Stroud, you don't either, because you don't take that risk. Whereas if both Will Levis and Anthony Richardson do, maybe that gives you an opportunity to be like, hang on, I've got a big arm as well. These are two big arm quarterbacks, and look, I can throw it that far as well. So I think it'll come down to might be a little bit of sizing up.
Yeah, I think the most pressure could be on Will Levis, because I think he's the one who does need to prove that he's got some accuracy, because there are so many concerns there. Anthony Richardson, I mean, I think with these guys, because they're so different in makeup across the top four, you're probably looking at different teams who are looking at different quarterbacks. It's so much about scheme and who the offensive coordinator is, how they want to run that offense. But yeah, ultimately, I think Will Levis, he's the one who really could do with a great week.
Yeah, I think if I was just rounding out, if I was Anthony Richardson, I would go out there and throw no matter what the others are doing. I know that's slightly against what you said there, Stu. I think I would go out and do it, because slightly I don't think he does anything to lose. His biggest knock is accuracy. So if he comes out there and isn't particularly accurate, then that's exactly what we thought you were. Whereas if he go out there and he's laying them up, and let's be honest, they don't run particularly complex routes that they should be relatively simple throws for him. It's easier to say that, I know, but I would go out there and do it. The short throws should be relatively easy enough for him to complete, and then on the deep ones, if he's overthrowing guys, then I don't think he'd be too bothered, because it's just showing his arm strength anyway.
Always revolves around quarterbacks, doesn't it? Even though it's such a false environment, everyone's still. We all remember just watching Josh Allen just launching it about 100 miles per throw, and it was just fun to watch. So, I think we might be in for, if they decide to throw some of these guys, it might be quite a show that they do put on.
If they don't, it's going to be a very underwhelming. I maybe would take that opportunity. They play him in prime time now, so if you're watching in the UK, you're going to have to maybe stay up to 1 o'clock to get to the end of this. So maybe for the quarterback ones, if the big four aren't bothering, maybe have an early night that night. Come back another day, because the others aren't really going to be worth watching. The only other guy would be Hendon Hooker, and he's not going to throw anyway.
But like you say, it does revolve around quarterbacks, and as has our conversation so far. Who else has got stuff to prove this week? Non-quarterbacks, should I add?
Just, I don't know if we're going to kind of talk about certain positions, but one player I'm really interested to see and what they do is Jalen Hyatt's 40 time. I think if because you see him on the field, he's absolutely screaming up the field. He looks really quick. If he can hit, there's rumours he can hit in the high 4.2s. If he can hit around that range, I think that sees him going round 1. If he is slower and he's hitting around that 4.4 mark, I don't think we see Jalen Hyatt as a round 1 pick, because his calling card is speed. And if he's hitting that top end speed, that could be quite important for him. I don't know whether the combine's obviously goes to measure where he hits that kind of speed at some point. I think will be interesting to see.
Right. So Jalen Hyatt ran 10.46 100 meters. So running 100 meters in 10.46. That's low 4.3 speed. Now, that is in an environment where you're on a track, you've got the specialist footwear on, that you're not running on. Well, I know they're not running on grass in Indy, but it's artificial grass at least, isn't it? I think I would be surprised if he does hit anything in the 4.2s because of that reason. I think you do have to add a little bit on because of the environment that they're running in. They haven't got their professional footwear on. They don't have their spikes on, running on an actual athletics track like the record speed that we have is. So I think low 4.3s is probably his benchmark, and I think that's all he needs to do, really. I think he just needs to go, if he can go 4.35 or less, I think that's good enough for him.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting, hasn't it? Hyatt has, after the first couple of mock drafts that came out about a month ago, Hyatt all of a sudden is appearing in most people's at some point in round 1. Kind of somewhere in the 20s. I think Lance Zerline had him going somewhere in the teens. I think he got him that high up.
12.
Yeah.
Apart from me.
Yeah. And I think that top end speed is something that could get you into the first round. There's a lot of receivers. There's not a clear kind of top 3 or 4 as such. You each of them there's a slight knock on them. I think there are a number of receivers where their 40 time could help put them just above the next guy. I think there are so many guys, aren't there? There's Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, Josh Downs. They're all around about 175 pounds, somewhere between, I know Tank Dell's shorter, but somewhere between 5'9", 5'10", 6 foot sort of range. And 40 time is going to be crucial to some of those receivers. I think even somebody like Rashee Rice, who had he had a decent Senior Bowl, and he's a good receiver, but doesn't have a top end speed. If he could do something that was 4.4s as opposed to 4.6s, then again, people that might help his draft stock. So I think there's a lot there for receivers around that 40 time.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of quick times. I think there's a lot of players who will run quickly. A player that I'm really intrigued about is Jackson Smith and Jigba, the receiver from Ohio State, because he's been pegged as quite, at this point, unathletic player. Now, I wouldn't say he was unathletic. He just maybe has average athleticism. And I think for him, he just needs to go out and prove that. We know he's not going to run in the 4.3s. He might not even run in the 4.4s, but if he can just put some average speed on tape, I think that will really help him in the narrative that is being created around Jackson Smith and Jigba. It'll just help settle some of the discourse. So kind of when it comes to receivers, athleticism is so important that it means he'll potentially drop behind some other players when it comes to rankings because of that athletic ability. Whereas if he can go out and just show, look, I am slightly better than average athlete, I think that'll be good enough for him. I think the vertical might be important for him as well. And you touched on him there, MJ. Jordan Addison, his size, he will be around the 175-pound mark, which is going to be slightly more than Devontae Smith a couple of years ago. And we all remember the conversation around him and his slimness. That's 175 would put him in around the 4th percentile for Jordan Addison. So that would be an absolute outlier at the position, the same as Devontae Smith was. So it would be his weight. He's tall. I think he should come around the 6 foot mark. But his weight is going to be a really important discussion for him.
So it's him and Bryce Young down to the pizza parlors then in Indy. They'll just keep an eye out for them if you're out there. Yeah, Jordan Addison, as you say, that again could be his week this week could propel him to being again somebody in the teens. I think was it DJ's latest one had Jordan Addison higher than previous mock drafts as well. So he's got a lot that could help his stock this week.
It's a strange one, isn't it, the combine? Going off on a slight tangent here, but we're talking about 40 times and the process of the combine. It's so weird. If a player said to you, "Hey, coach, what should I do in my downtime? I've just finished the season of college. What should I do? Should I work on my speed? Yeah. I want you to run the exact same length from a stance that you're not going to use in the game, not in any sort of route, exactly 40 yards. Yeah, I want you to do that all the time, so as fast as you can." And even, the same with, I'll work on my agility. Yeah, okay. Just do the same 3-cone drill. Great. The same length every time. Yep. Strength. Yeah, I want you to bench just one weight, though. You can only bench just one weight as many times as you can. Don't do nothing lighter, nothing heavier. It's kind of stupid. I get it because he's putting everyone in a level playing field. And I think it shows that if a player can improve his 40 time, it shows that he can get his head down and work on something and improve. But it does seem kind of, crazy, especially with, the technology we've got these days. You can track players' speed, like game speed. That's what's really important. I mean, Stuart, you spoke to the guys at Zebra Technology, all the stuff they're doing in terms of all over the field, every single player. There's so much data there, or all the PFF stuff as well. These teams know absolutely everything there is to know, and the fact that they need them to run in a straight line from a stance that they're not going to use in the NFL, like you said, it's kind of crazy. That said, I'm still going to watch all of it. So
yeah,
I think it's potentially good as a confirmatory tool more than anything. I don't think you should be wildly changing on what someone does at the combine. But if you think somebody, he's not that athletic, but he does a bit better at the 3-cone drill that you think he might have done, it might bump him up a couple of spots in your rankings. Or, I think this guy looks really fast on game tape. Yeah, he's blitzed the 40. Yeah, that just nails it, that he is really fast. But I also think, again, we're wandering around on tangents, that the actual just going and meeting these guys is really important at the combine. The bits that we don't see, because it is an opportunity for all the teams to meet with all these top 300, whatever guys is going to be down there. So I think that, the testing is, and it's nice for the guys to get a bit of just eyeballs on people, but I think there's more to it than just the testing.
Right.
Yeah, they should let us see I want to see the interviews. I want to see it all.
No, I was just going to say, and kind of the golden rule is you get these measurements, and then if somebody's slower than you thought they were, you go back and look at the tape.
Absolutely.
and you go, okay, so did that translate into game speed? If their vertical leap isn't quite what you thought it was, you look at the contested catches and just as Stu said, it's confirmatory, but the rule is you probably then go back and look at the tape and just check your evidence there from what the measurements are.
Yeah, I was going to say, when it comes to the athletic testing, put it all in context, right? That of course there are going to be some more casual fans about. That's why they put it in prime time, because it's this big event. But we go back to Jalen Hyatt's speed. NFL teams already know how fast he can run in a straight line because they've got the zebra data, as you just said. They already know basically what he will run on the field. It's not really necessary. You just have to do enough. I mean, if you come from nowhere and you can run a 4.2 and you're an unknown prospect, then maybe that can help you. But none of these teams are being introduced to these players for the first time at the combine. They've already got their scouting reports on all of them. They've already got their kind of their board and their round evaluation roughly set on these guys. It's just a matter of, let's put it in context. It's just a matter of let's see what it is like in this environment. But it's really not that important, is it? Because a lot of going back in the day, it would have been huge, and it's now become a massive TV event. But as I said, especially with Jalen Hyatt's speed, the NFL already have basically the better data that's going to be provided to them than at the combine, apart from the size measurables.
Well, we'll still spend plenty of time talking about it.
Of course.
It's you're right. I think you are right, and it is now a bit more of a spectacle, and it does introduce people who may be not obsessed by the draft to people and say, "Oh, that guy looks fast. I'd quite like to know a bit more about him for my team." And I can get why they do that. And again, it's sometimes as well comparing like for like. If you've got two wide receivers who are very close on your board, for example, you've got data that looks pretty the same. Actually, just seeing how they move or what they do in certain things can maybe just help split that difference between two players.
Yeah, and just thinking about it, I was just looking at. I think about somebody like Eric Stokes, cornerback that went to Green Bay, and his college career was good but not spectacular statistically. But he ran 4.25 in the 40 at the combine. And he sneaks into the back end of round one. He's picked 29 round one. And you'd have to think that going to the combine and running 4.25 obviously made the Packers think, well, actually, end of round one, we'll take him there as opposed to just letting him slip into day two.
Yeah, there's certain teams, certain GMs. I'm looking at my team's GM. They'll see someone run fast and go, oh, well, I've a bit of him.
I was just thinking of going on that where it depends what type of team you are as well, right? That there are teams out there that have thresholds and need players to hit threshold. Now, the NFL's obviously evolving. Like you get some positionless players, don't you, now, where you kind of do have to take it as you introduce speed, players are going to get lighter. That's just how it works. So it depends if you're one of those teams that has thresholds. And moving on slightly, just to a player who the threshold is going to be important for, and that's Peter Skoronski, the offensive lineman from Northwestern, where traditionally for a tackle your arm length had to be at least 33 inches. Think about teams like the Patriots and those kind of GMs that come from the Patriots tree. I believe they still have these kind of thresholds in place where unless you hit that threshold, you're just not on their board. It's going to be really important for Peter Skoronski because he came in replacing Rashawn Slater at Northwestern. We remember when Rashawn Slater was coming out, it was all about his arm length. Now, he hit 33 exactly. So we remember us all speaking about how short his arms are. He just hit the threshold. Peter Skoronski came in as his replacement and has been extremely good, but will be less than that. I think there's not much doubt in that likely he will be around the 32 mark. Now, if you're an NFL team, and this is where it comes into it, doesn't it? For that extra inch in arm length, do you take an extremely good player off the board just for the sake of that? And it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, for me, I love Peter Skoronski, so I think he's an excellent prospect, and I think that he could play at the tackle position absolutely no problem at the NFL. I think he's so technically good at what he does. And I hope it doesn't affect his draft stock, and I hope that teams do see the benefit of, do we want someone, as we say, who's like an albatross but can't play the position, or do we want someone who's just a bloody good offensive lineman who knows what they're doing, who knows how to play the position, and we could put him in tomorrow and he'd be absolutely fine. He's not going to be overawed by the thing. And I think there is probably a less now. People are more willing to take a chance on prospects than maybe even 5-10 years ago, when you had your just old school football guys. Arms too short, cheerio. They actually are looking a bit more at now. Well, what can you mean? Thinking about it, when would you have seen someone as short as Kyler Murray be drafted number 1 overall? That 10, 15 years ago, that just wouldn't have happened. He'd have been like a 7th rounder or something like that. Ridiculous. So maybe teams will have a look at them. Some of the more forward-thinking newer GMs might be more attuned to that.
Yeah, I think it will be fascinating with Skoronski, and I think his career and the likes of Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones may well be interlinked, because at the moment I'd say that they will go very quickly off the board within a few picks of each other. So it will be really interesting to see where teams take them. As you say, with Rashawn Slater, we had the concerns, and he looked amazing in his rookie year. And unfortunately, arm length is no guarantee of talent. Evan Neal had 34-inch arms and had a fairly rocky ride for the Giants this year. Still think he's a good
him off yet. You can't write him off yet.
I still think he's a good player, because we went through the same thing with Andrew Thomas. I think he'll be fine, exactly. But I think that I think with somebody like Skoronski, because he obviously he knows this, then I think technically he has worked on this. He knows what he's got to work with, and therefore he's focused more on his technique. So I would still be putting him in the same bracket, that bracket of those first 3 offensive tackle who we expect to see go off the board round 1.
Yeah, and it just goes back roughly to what we were saying about Bryce Young, right? That that he doesn't have the arm length. Does the confirmation really matter that much? His arm length aren't 33. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Let's quickly dive into a few sort of interesting positions to look forward to. So the defensive end, there's some what's a nice term, beasts that we're going to see this week. Lucas Van Ness, Keon White. Tell us a bit about them and what do you think they're going to do over in Indy. Going to be special.
I think Lucas Van Ness is somebody who's going to test very well. He seems to be a very explosive athlete. And I think that he's someone who, if he tests well, could do his draft stock no harm. We've seen people in the past who height, weight, speed, work on the other stuff later, which has happened, and we've talked about it already at the top of the podcast. And I think Van Ness is somebody who a lot of teams will have a close eye on to see how athletic and how. I think his 10-yard split of his 40 might be quite important for him as well, just to see how quick he is off the mark. And he could make himself a bit of coin, few draft spaces up maybe, if he tests well.
This is a player who wasn't never even a starter in college, and Daniel Jeremiah has mocked him twice to the Falcons at 8. This is how good we're expecting him to test. So he is one definitely that I would be watching. Keon White, I think should and will test really well. We've spoken about him a couple of times on here. He was at the Senior Bowl. We've spoken about him then, that he was a Freaks List member on Bruce Feldman's Freaks List, can run over 20 mile an hour, was a tight end, converted to defensive end, and can even play on the interior a little bit. I would be expecting really good athletic numbers from Keon White.
The one I'm really interested about is Miles Murphy, because he is this year's candidate so far for somebody who, for whatever reason, has started to slide down some boards, not getting an awful lot of chatter as he was at the start of the process. I'm thinking a little bit like what happened to George Karlaftis last year, where he ended up going at the back end of round 1. Should test well, but there's a whole cluster, isn't there? As soon as we get past Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, there is a whole cluster. You've mentioned some names there, and you can throw in Nolan Smith, BJ Ojolari, Will McDonald, Derek Hall. There's a whole raft of edge rushers who could go anywhere, back end of round 1 into round 2, and they're all looking to test well this week. And Miles Murphy is somebody who doesn't want to lose any more ground than he already has.
I think we might see a rebound on Miles Murphy. I think he's been mocked in that top 5 since the start of the season. And folk have as Owen talked about, kind of prospect fatigue. Is that what's happened with Miles Murphy? I think we might see a downswing, and then as it gets called back towards we might see him creeping back up the teens again, maybe a bit higher, top 10 maybe, don't know. I think that people will come back round to Miles Murphy again.
And quickly, another group of beasts, the tight ends. Usually get 1 or 2 sort of really good tight ends. There's a handful this year that are going to go day 1, day 2. Anyone you're looking forward to seeing this week?
Darnell Washington needs to run faster than we think he will. I think that'll be important for him to steady ground. There seems to be a discourse at the moment where all of a sudden Michael Mayer is no longer a good football player. He will test better than you expect as well. But Darnell Washington, we know how big he is. It'd be interesting to see what he runs. I think that might be important for him. And then we all know again from the Senior Bowl that Luke Musgrave will run extremely quick.
I always laugh at this kind of stage of the draft. We'll get these guys like Michael Mayer who've been with folk people. Not speaking about ourselves because we're amazing. Just kind of focused down so narrowly on the bits that they're not good at. But then there's other prospects who you've got loads of weakness in the game. Oh, but they're massive and they can run fast. They go on this upward trajectory. It's a really bizarre thing for me to get my head round at times. And Michael Mayer seems to be suffering a little bit from that at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. With the tight ends, it's almost like, who do we like this week? Last week it was Luke Musgrave. This week it's Dalton Kincaid, I think. We are spoilt for choice at tight end, which is unique for a draft of recent years. And yeah, just reflecting on what you said there, Stu, thinking of some of the names that we've gone through where there's prospect fatigue. Miles Murphy. Is the prospect fatigue with Will Anderson, with Mayer? Between the 4 of us, we would have any of our teams drafting any of these guys, wouldn't we? They are, and I think the ones that we're mentioning there are all very solid players. But this round, this draft, because of this lack of really top players, if somebody flashes, if it's amazing speed or explosion, twitchiness, that they are going to rise up the board. And I think the way that teams view boards, and I think this is what Trevor Sycamore touched on last week, teams' boards are going to be vastly different. And if we get to see after the draft, where certain teams had guys, I think we're going to see an awful lot of differences in teams' boards.
I think that will come out, and when we do our top 5s as well, I think our boards are between the group of us, and I know we talk a lot, but we all have different opinions about things as well, and we are going to get a consensus on some, but we're going to be so far apart, I think. Could be wrong on some other players. It could be really interesting.
We don't want consensus.
I think
there's no point there being 4 of us if we all think the same thing. We're here to bounce off each other and share ideas. We don't. There's no. We can't. Or we won't, and we shouldn't all have the same rankings.
But I think the top 5s, the one that we always hate doing is the last couple of years has been tight ends. I don't think we'll hate it as much as some other ones this year.
Absolutely. Talking of top 5s, it isn't long till it's top 5 season part of the draft season. That'll be coming very, very soon. But that's all we've got time for today, I believe, guys. Unless anybody else got one more player or one more.
No, the one player that I think to look out for who will test like
you
an
said no,
beast.
And there you are.
No, as in,
I know who he's going to say as well. I'm going to silently bet myself.
Yeah, we've got another 20 minutes here.
Yeah, no, just watch out. Christian Gonzalez will test amazingly at that corner. He could be the best tester of the combine, so just watch out for him.
I was right.
Good stuff. There you go. Plenty of names to look out for. It'll all be going down in Indianapolis at the combine. And that's it for today. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching. We're, of course, on YouTube as well. Check us out, like and subscribe, etc. We'll be back in the next few days. Like I say, we've got interviews, news, mock drafts, everything you could possibly need for the NFL draft. Of course, check out the website, 99yards.com. It's all on there. Follow our Twitter at 99yards. It's all on there too. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening.